Welcome to r/relationship advice. This is part 2 of a 2-part story. This is the wife's side of the story. I, female 29, cheated on my husband, male 32. I got pregnant and had an abortion. I cheated again and we hit each other. I use Reddit too. If you thought I wouldn't stumble on this post, you clearly didn't think it would blow up the way it did. I was 20 when I met my husband. We met when we were both traveling around Europe. I was just finishing my trip, he was just starting his. We met and slept together the same day and spent my last few days together. For anyone saying this was a red flag for him any more than it was for me, your sexism is showing. After he went home, we struck up communication again and had a long distance relationship that lasted a year. During this time, we talked about previous relationships and why they failed. I told him my ex dumped me for kissing another girl, and at the time I didn't think it was a big deal, but I had since realized that cheating is cheating, and it was wrong of me to do it. He moved to me, as his work is freelance, and he can do it from anywhere, and I had spent the last year settling into a job I really liked. This was his suggestion. He makes more money than me, and wanted to buy a house right away. I told him I would rather wait until we were married. We had discussed marriage at length, and it's what we both wanted, and we could buy one together. But he said he didn't want to throw money away on rent, and when we got married, and I signed a prenup, he would put my name on the mortgage. The suggestion of a prenup was offensive, as he knew my family are well off, and I'd never cared about money, but I agreed. I also wanted to keep my own last name if we got married, and he said he wouldn't marry me if I didn't take his last name. This I also agreed to. He said fair is fair, and if I wanted to live and raise kids near my family and not his, and I be the one to stay home while he worked when we had kids, which I wanted, then I had to make compromises too. I didn't think these were fair compromises, but I agreed. He bought the house against my wishes, and then we got married, and to his credit, he put my name on the mortgage the following week. But this all left a bitter taste in my mouth. For the most part things were great. I had a good social life, and was outgoing. He was more of a stay-at-home type. I had lots of friends. He was focused on work. We were different, but we made it work. One of the men I worked with expressed an interest, even knowing I was married, and I told him no. I told my husband this, and he asked me to stop spending time with him outside work. I told him no as I had already shot the other man down. This was a mistake on my part, and I admit it. When things were good, they were great, but I also had resentments about the decisions I'd been forced to make, and felt less like an equal partner in the marriage by the day. He bought a dog without my consent. When we were long distance, I told him I wanted a dog, but that I wanted to wait until we had kids so they could bond together. He claims I never mentioned this last part. He says I didn't. I say I did. He claimed it was a surprise for me and that I was ungrateful for kicking up a fuss, so the dog stayed. I've never been great at communicating and prefer my own space when things go bad, so instead of talking about these issues, I let them fester and spent more time with my friends, including the guy from work. My husband was overprotective and asked me to check in with him if I was out late and asked me not to stay out at night, even when I was staying at a female friend's house. I'm not the apron and dishwashing type of woman. I have always valued my freedom. These arguments drove a wedge between us, and I made a terrible decision. I was drunk and slept with the guy from the office. I came home after and slept on the couch and cried all night. My husband came down the next morning and attacked me for not coming home at a reasonable time, said I was a mess because I slept in the clothes I went out in and that I looked like a lady of the evening. The other man, Greg, never said things like this to me. He enjoyed being social and dancing and all the other things my husband didn't. I was young and stupid and decided to keep seeing him. He was kind and decent, and the more time I spent with him, the more I wished I'd met him first. I found out I was pregnant. I didn't know who the father of the baby was, and I was racked with guilt. I told Greg the day I found out, and he told me to get an abortion, that he didn't want to get caught up in the middle of raising a kid with a married woman. This was the moment when the affair ended. I told my husband a week later. He didn't have to pry the truth out of me, like he said in his post. A couple of months in, he saw me upset, and I told him. He flew home without telling me, and ignored my calls. I realized then that I'd made a terrible mistake, and decided to recommit to my marriage. I told him I would get an abortion if the child wasn't his. He told me to go bang myself, and hung up. Eventually he came home, and we found out the baby wasn't his. So, as we agreed, I put on the appointment for the abortion. When we did the paternity test, the doctor asked me if I wanted to know the sex. My husband answered for me and said, "It doesn't matter," and we left. I went back without him and found out it wasn't an it, it was a she, my daughter. Over the course of the week I had thoughts of being a mother. I had always wanted to raise kids, and in my fantasies during this week, I didn't think about the other man. This was my husband's baby. I pictured the three of us together as a family. It wasn't ideal, but there was no good reason I could think of that we couldn't make the best of a bad situation. I planned to tell him who the father really was. I panicked and told him it was a one-time thing while I was away for the weekend, and I would quit my job. It wasn't perfect, but if he loved me, we could make it work. Life throws tests at us, and when I took my marriage vows, I realized this, and hoped he would too. The day of the appointment I begged him not to make me choose. I begged him to do one thing for me, not to commit to a lifetime of it, not even to love the baby, just to do one thing for me. I begged him to try. I asked him to give it a chance. He told me he was filing for divorce. I need to make something clear. Yes, I made mistakes, but I love my husband. He was the great love of my life, and still is. He told me he wouldn't even try to make it work, and if I didn't have the operation, he would leave me and file for divorce that day. I asked him to let me think about it, and he said no to that too. I was torn between two horrible choices, and I chose one. I had the abortion. I was never going to raise a baby alone. If he wasn't with me on this, I wasn't going through with it, and he made it clear he wasn't with me. The few weeks after the operation, I was in more pain than I had ever been in my life. During this time, I stayed with my parents because we couldn't be around each other. I blamed him for making me choose. He still hated me for the cheating, and even told me he hated me for wanting to keep the baby and for asking him to be around for us. But I didn't want it to be in vain, so I moved back home and tried to make it work. I kept my feelings bottled up because I didn't want to remind him of what I'd done. I was on medical leave for 3 months, and none of my friends knew. As far as they knew, Sam, my husband, and I had miscarried, as did my parents. I had nobody to talk to. I asked Greg to come over, and we talked. I cried, and he cried with me. It felt good to be heard, and not have to wear a mask. These visits happened another half a dozen times, and it's important to know nothing sexual happened. The affair was over. I was leaning on a friend, the only friend who knew what I was going through. You know the rest. He came home, found out Greg was the father. We moved away, and things got better. These were great years, and I loved him with my whole heart. I never forgot what happened, but we talked about having our own children. I was happy, and I had him to thank for that. When I found out I couldn't have children anymore, I tried to tell him, but I'd remembered the way he looked at me years ago when he found out. The names he called me. I thought of how much he loved me, and I didn't want to ruin that by telling him I could never give him children because of my betrayal. I reached out to Greg. I found out he'd moved away from our hometown too, and was only a few hours drive away. He is married now, but I wasn't looking to start anything back up, only to talk. He told me I should tell Sam. I couldn't. We agreed to meet, and I took the day off work. We met halfway, and we slept together. We agreed it would be a one-time thing, and both went back to our partners. To anyone who wants to call me a lady of the evening, I know it was wrong, but life isn't black and white. I don't regret anything. I love them both, and for better or worse, they will both always be a part of what makes me who I'm today. I got drunk and told Sam everything. I was hurt and cruel to him, and told him I wasn't sorry I met up with Greg. He called me a lady of the evening, again, and told me he was glad I gave up the baby. I slapped him. He slapped me back. I don't resent him at all for hitting me. He had never lifted a hand to me before, and I said awful things that night, but after he told me he was glad of the choice he forced me into, deprived me of ever being able to be a mother, that I can't forgive. I will never forgive myself for the abortion, and I will never forgive him. The difference is, he gets to move on and have a family, and I never will. I'm back home with my parents now, and I've spoken to divorce lawyers too. They say a prenup doesn't mean anything anymore, but I'm not going to take anything away from you. I just want it to be over too. So maybe we can both find some peace. Here's the first comment. See, the trouble with all this is that these are all results of the original set of choices that you made to cheat, continue to cheat, and well, you hit the risk. Neither of you are in any way right here, but I'm sorry, maybe I'm a bad person, but I have no sympathy for you. The one person in the story I feel bad for is Greg's wife. Edit. The more I read your responses, the clearer the picture gets, to me at least. Number 1. You claim you got to the point where you wished you met Greg first. Number 2. You were resentful of even the thought of cutting him out in any way. Number 3. The first person you go to when you know you are pregnant? Greg. I'm betting you did know who the father was. Number 4. You try to get your husband to raise the child, even when you know he will not stay with you if you have the child. Number 5. In all of this, who do you go to for comfort? Each and every time? Greg. Number 6. You very carefully never say a bad word about Greg, and even go so far as to keep protecting him. Number 7. You lay all the blame of the abortion choice on your husband, but never the guy who tells you to get one first. I'm guessing at some point you wanted to have Greg's child, not your stick in the mud husband's. This is why you cannot ever put any blame on Greg. You love him, not your husband. Here's the next comment. You say, I love my husband. No, you don't. You disrespected him by cucking him shamelessly, and you had the gall to ask him to raise another man's baby with you? Are you seriously out of your mind? Do you understand how painful and emasculating that would be? Well, I'm glad that a divorce is being initiated. The damage you caused in your marriage is highly unlikely to be repaired. Here's the next comment. You said, just do one thing for me. Please don't act like it was just a small meaningless thing. You asked him to wake up every morning and raise another man's child, a living, breathing representation of your affair. You wanted him to live a lie, telling the world this was his baby in some denial-driven fantasy. He didn't make you choose. You chose. You decided you would rather keep a toxic, broken marriage than to be a mother. You can wrap up that however you want, but that's the truth. You keep talking about young mistakes. Like that mitigates the things you've done and the destruction you caused. It doesn't. You set this all in motion by choosing to cheat. Choices matter. I hope you've learned that, but I don't think you have. Here's the next comment. Why did you bother posting this? You just confirmed everything that your husband said. There's literally nothing in your post that would make anyone want to take your side. You're a bad wife and a bad person who consistently makes terrible decisions. Do you really think that confirming that stuff for us is going to do anything for you? It's not. You shouldn't have made this post. You had no reason to air your side of the story, as it didn't add anything important to the story. Indeed, you just come across as petty. Your husband posted here because he was hurt. He posted here because he needed someone to talk to about his problems. You're posting here because you can't stand to see him processing his issues. You've hurt him, and you just want to continue hurting him. You act like you're accepting your part in all this, but you aren't. If you were, you wouldn't have posted here. You would have accepted that you failed your husband, and that your failings caused the death of your marriage. Instead, you're posting here so you can tell your side of the story. You probably don't want to hear this, but you're just going to continue failing people until you actually learn how to take responsibility for your actions. I strongly suggest you stay out of relationships until you learn how to stop cheating on and betraying the people who love you. Here's the next comment. What advice are you looking for? You should have listened to your husband when he asked you not to spend time with Greg outside of work. Respecting your husband's not unreasonable wishes would have saved you a lifetime of heartbreak and resentment. You won't find any sympathy here. Post update. I talked to a therapist today. I read all your comments last night and this morning, and when I came back, I've been reading all of your messages all day, even if I haven't replied. I've been reading and digesting all of it. Some people have been really kind and told me I'm only human and made mistakes. These comments took place in private message. I imagine for fear on behalf of the commenter of being mocked. Some people took a harsher line and told me that I was completely to blame and a total screw up, but that it's not too late and I can always turn it around. And some of you, let's be honest, the sweeping majority of you have been awful, horrible, hate-filled pricks who have entirely too much invested in an internet stranger's marriage and extramarital affairs. You should all maybe look at your own lives and try to figure out why you feel the need to go online and tell bad people why they're bad people. That being said, every message has helped me. The cruel ones shook me to my core, and had they not been so brutal and so many, I could have maybe shrugged them off. But there are over 1,000 comments on this page, and there are probably less than 100 that aren't some variation of calling me a see you next Tuesday, or a lady of the evening, or a monster. And even when I stopped replying, I kept reading. I have read every single word that every single one of you has typed. It shook my foundations and allowed cracks to appear that I've been chipping away at ever since. I read all last night, slept 4 hours, read again, saw my therapist, and read some more. The kind messages were a life ring. I needed those too. But again, if they had been the majority, I could have taken the easy road. I needed the breath of air every once in a while, but the poison cleaned me out, and the moderate messages kept me grounded between the extremes. I don't want to detail everything on here that my therapist and I talked about, because this is already a rant, and I'm not done yet. But 1 hour with a paid professional and 1,000 insults held a pretty inescapable mirror up to my face. Sam did absolutely nothing wrong. I would say I forgive him for the abortion, but there is nothing to forgive. That was the biggest realization I've had. I put him in an awful position and asked him to do something that probably would have driven him to suicide. I chose to have the abortion and mutilate my own body beyond repair. I alone chose that. I selfishly destroyed my marriage twice by cheating, because banging and forgetting being a grown-up was easier than being an adult and standing by the man I swore to love and expected such staggering loyalty from. I betrayed him in ways I, as a woman, am incapable of ever understanding, and I have to live with that and my mutilated body forever, and I should live with that forever as a reminder. I want to express my genuine gratitude to each and every one of you, but there are 2 people I want to thank in particular. The first is the man or woman who PM'd me about the authentic me, about what I was truly asking of my husband and what it would have meant for him to push him to accept. I would have enslaved him. I don't remember your name. I'm sorry. There are so many messages. I hope you see this update. Thank you. And the other is a certain user. Your breakdown of me made the first crack. I don't think you were trying to help me, but you did. I'm grateful to you all, and I will keep reading comments or PMs if any of you have anything to say. I'm open to talking to people. I will not be replying to any more hateful messages, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't type them, because I will see them. And if you really need to keep telling me what a diseased person I am, then do, because I am. Someone just made a post about a retarded dog, and it was the first time I've smiled in 2 days, so I'm not sitting here crying and being a victim. I'm digesting it all. Thanks, Emily, since I named everyone else. And if you're reading this, you deserve so much better. I'm deeply, deeply ashamed. I'm so sorry for all of it. Thanks for listening.